Well, Malusi Gigaba is having his first interaction with the Parliamentary Finance Committee as Finance Minister.
Gigaba took over the post end of March from Praveen Gordhan and has had to put out a lot of fires. He recently returned from a US roadshow where he met up with international investors, including IMF and ratings agencies, as the country has been battling continuous downgrades. Gigaba is expected to report back to Parliament on such engagements and the current status quo of South Africa. Well, let's go live to Parliament.
We'll open it out to you. Remind me, Minister, when we meet, I'll give you an anecdote about Alec Irwin, who told me, Eunice, I will never talk to you again when you're writing notes, because I showed him what he had said in the study group 6 months. He said, Eunice, can you please stop writing? In those days, I couldn't type. I said, this is what you said 6 months ago, and look what you are saying now. He said, Eunice, can you stop writing? So let me tell you, dear Mbuthelezi, we've got you monitored. Now, on the issues that Floyd raises, one of my jobs, Minister, I'm about to round up, is to interpret what members say. Sometimes the subtext, because you're new here, you'll get the subtext. The point that, you see, I always thought the argument was that national treasury is captured by white monopoly capital, by the international forces of reaction and imperialism, and whatever else that's bad. Now, what Floyd is admitting to in an open committee meeting, I hope the media will notice, that actually National Treasury, since you came in and Chris Malekane came in, has been captured by the EFF. Because he's claiming, that the 7 Malekane proposals were actually from their constitution. So can Floyd have a press conference outside this meeting, not now, we haven't got time, and answer that question to the media out there? But the other thing that Floyd's asking you in a nutshell, you see, one of my jobs, because I'm a man of few words, as you know, so I can summarize for you what people say in many words. What Floyd is asking you, Minister, are you going to implement not the ANC's program, but the EFF's 7-point program? That's his question. Minister, can you, I would like to ask Floyd, in which democracy in the world does a 6% party tell the 62% party? It can only happen in South Africa's surrealism, right? Hey, we got 6%. Can you implement our program? How democratic is that? So 2 of the questions are to Floyd, not for answering here, but to answer a media conference out there. Thank you very much. Over to you, Minister. Sorry?
Just before, Chair, I think...
I knew he was going to say that. Okay.
You know what you left, Chair? The DM agreed when he was this side that the sugar tax issue need to be thoroughly consulted. So if he changes now and want to implement it before we consult with the farmers, he's in trouble.
That's the other issue I forgot, the sugar tax issue. There's nothing to hide. People know it, right? We are a sugar, it's not sugar tax, it's sweet, beverages tax, yeah. Minister, there too, there's nothing to hide. It's understandable, Minister. There's no like divided ANC. If you look at the health and finance portfolio committees, and you look at us as a whole, both the study groups, the majority, are divided around whether we should implement the sugar beverages tax. And you know what the issues are. The balance between health issues, emerging African sugarcane farmers in the province you and I come from, and interestingly, Comrade Buthelezi, and also the loss of jobs. There seems to be some degree of consensus, though it's difficult to tell, that it may mean 5,000 jobs. Now, with the poultry industry, as you know, and now the sugarcane sector, FAO is obviously, and other unions are up in arms. We need to find the right balances. So that is another issue that the committee will process further when the rates and monetary bill is put to a public hearing in the next 3 weeks. But it is going to need some attention because there's nothing to hide. There are some of us in the ANC who want this thing in a way that ensures job losses are minimal and that some incentive is provided to African cane growers. And maybe the tax you get should be used for that. Others are saying no. it won't happen. Every time we ask government to strike these deals, it never happens, and so the consequences are going to be you're going to diminish, decimate the African cane growers who've just come onto the scene, and secondly, the workers will lose their jobs and often have, as you know, Minister, the state never really comes to the party in creating new jobs. And finally, can I alert everybody? The fact that the Minister, Deputy Minister, and myself are Zulus, and because sugarcane is a KwaZulu-Natal thing, doesn't therefore mean that we will be tribalistic, okay? We will look at the issue on its merits. Thank you very much. Over then to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and honourable members for the questions. Maybe just to start with the last issue you've raised. When Minister Gordon presented the sugary beverages tax proposal during the budget, there was one honourable minister sitting next to me who quipped, did the Minister of Finance say sugar daddy tax?
He could have asked, is this man of the heritage of indentured labor? Where did the Indian South Africans come? Is he not selling out his ancestry?
No, but thank you. Let me start with the first question that the Honourable Maynard asks. With regard to radical economic transformation, as outlined by President Zuma in February. And I guess it will also go on to address, to also cover one of the questions that was asked by the chairperson. The debate about radical economic transformation is an ongoing discussion in South Africa, and I don't think we need to fear that discussion. We need not suppress it. Because if essentially you have a country with a particular background, and that background has left a lot of people outside the margins of the economy, unemployed, no assets, no opportunities for economic participation, and even with no skills. I think earlier on the debate in the early years of our democracy, I think framed by President Mbeki during the two nations debate, addressed itself to those who are in the second economy, black, mostly women, with no bridge to join the first economy. The first economy was linked to international trade, the international economy, and with all other privileges and advantages of formal economic engagement. And those in the second economy had no capacity, no infrastructure, no relationship with the formal economy, with international trade. And he argued that we need to address this. And over the course of the years, we actually largely have had these people remaining marginalized from formal economic participation and have remained still without those assets, whether you are talking about land, access to the financial sector, you're talking about assets and any other thing. And they are the people who remain without the skills and largely unemployed. Now, the issue is, for me, whatever the name you call it, you can call it accelerated growth, you can call it accelerated transformation, you can call it radical economic transformation, and you can call it inclusive growth. The fact of the matter is that you want to address the plight of these people, and the plight of these people doesn't confine itself to unemployment. It also includes their desire to own land assets, to have access to the financial sector, to be bankable, to become entrepreneurs, to have the possibility to own economic assets so that they become self-sustaining, they become independent. I don't think, therefore, that we should, and in the course of the discussion, you have different perspectives emerging precisely because it's a discussion yet. So you will have other views that go in the extreme left. You have other views that seem very minimalistic. But ultimately, what we are all trying to address is how do you get the majority of South Africans not only just simply employed, but how do you get them to participate in the economy, to own some assets, to become self-sustaining? And as I say, the discussion is not closed, and we shouldn't try in an artificial manner to say, close the debate in this way. We should engage in discussions. The ruling party itself has a debate leading to its national conference, its national policy conference in July, and its national conference in December. Even the ruling party hasn't yet resolved what it means. In its discussion document, it talks about a plan for inclusive growth and about what we need to do in terms of the land, in terms of building SMMEs, in terms of access to the financial sector, and a number of other areas to address this issue that I am talking about. So when the discussions are ongoing, we shouldn't hurry to say that there are contradictions because it's still a debate. Now, I think what we need to do is to separate between what are the existing policies in terms of the ruling party drawn from its national conference in 2012 and the various programs that have been implemented, and policies which are still under discussion leading to the conference that's taking place at the end of this year. So from where I sit, there are no contradictions. There are common concerns, genuine concerns for everybody. There are policies which had been agreed to, and all of us are therefore discussing and implementing these programs for accelerated inclusive growth. And the debate around what is meant by radical economic transformation are ongoing. And those debates will be concluded, I think, in a manner that takes the interests of all South Africans at heart. And so the issues as are being discussed should not cause any disquiet from any quarter. We all should be eager that we participate. Oxfam, for example, has released a report saying that only about 8 men in the world own wealth that own the amount of wealth that is more than that owned by 3.8 million people, poorest people in the world. In our own country, about 10% of the population own about 42% of the economy of the wealth of this land. We should worry about that. That is what we should be worrying about. In actual fact, the debate should be centered on how do you change that? Because that is unsustainable. The debate about radical economic transformation and inclusive growth is really not the biggest of our headaches. The biggest of our headaches is the unsustainable levels of inequality in our society. Unsustainable levels of poverty in our society, the very fact that a number of our people, 17 million of them, exist on social grants. And many of the people who are on social grants in South Africa actually could work if there were jobs. If there were SMMEs, if we rolled out the infrastructure and created sustainable jobs, perhaps half the people who are on social grants, maybe less, could actually get employment and be able to sustain themselves and their families. I think that's what we ought to be worrying ourselves about. And therefore, how do we resolve that? So at the end of the day, when the concepts are put aside, the issue is, what are the elements of the program for inclusive growth or radical economic transformation that we need to be focusing ourselves on? Evidently, we need to industrialize the South African economy. That should be at the top of our agenda. The industrialization of the South African economy, to the creation of a manufacturing sector, through beneficiation, the creation and supporting of the Black Industrialist Program, rolling out the infrastructure program, and leveraging of that infrastructure rollout plan to create supplier sectors in the economy so that we can get the emergence of new local suppliers that are South African-based, assets owned by South Africans, providing components and inputs to infrastructure and to our state-owned companies, and in that way creating sustainable jobs. Because at the end of the day, an economy based or supported by consumption, debt consumption, is unsustainable. When you meet shocks, whether global or even domestic, the economy gets shaken. That's what we should be focusing on. We need to support the creation of SMMEs. We need to support the programs to take advantage and leverage our oceans and continue to support the implementation of the infrastructure rollout, which means we must pay attention to the capacity of our state-owned companies to implement the infrastructure rollout program, crowd in private sector investments, implement private sector participation programs, so that we can unlock the balance sheets of our state-owned companies and the private sector to implement that infrastructure program. And we need to continue supporting interventions in the township economies and rural areas to support agro-processing so that we can create productive economic activity in those areas and transfer land assets to people in the rural areas and people in the townships by transferring title deeds to them, which will enable them to be able to use those title deeds, those properties as collaterals to start SMMEs and other initiatives. That basically means we need to do things in an unusual way. It basically means we need to do things in an unusual way. We need to drive the industrial program in South Africa in a manner that we have not done before. That sounds very radical to me, but it also sounds pretty much like a program for inclusive growth. There is nothing irresponsible in what I have said, and there is nothing business as usual in what I am also saying. And those issues are already contained in the structural reforms program that have already been agreed to. It could be that in the course of the discussions about how to accelerate all of these things, we may look at whether we need to do more, and in the course of that discussion about whether we need to do more, we then need to look at whether the fiscal allows us to. And I agree very firmly with the view that we need to balance between what we seek to achieve and what the fiscal allows us to achieve. And as we strike that balance, we must be of the view that it therefore is important for us to continue growing the economy and expand our revenue base. And growth is the main way to expand the tax base. It's the main way to expand the tax base, because we need to have more businesses formed. We need existing ones to expand, and we need all businesses to make profits and to get people employed. To achieve that, you don't only need the fiscals to intervene, you also need developmental coalitions between government and the private sector. And so the programs that have been agreed with the private sector in terms of supporting the growth of SMMEs and supporting the employment of 1 million young people into the youth employment service over the next 3 years need to be supported. We need to continue strengthening our strategic partnerships with business, so that the partnership is not based on frequent meetings, but it's based on actual interventions that support growth, that support business, and ensures therefore that we can expand the revenue base. I actually agree with Kevin Lings when he argues that one of the things we need to do in the country is to support business more, to play the role that it needs to play as the driver of growth, the driver of production, and the driver of employment. And one of the ways that we need to focus on, which is what SARS will be talking about, and that we will, as the ministry, be continuing to engage SARS on, is to improve its ability to collect revenue and the implementation of voluntary disclosure program, so that we can get more people to come on board to implement, to pay taxes, which we can then use to redistribute incomes and get social and economic investments. The second question related to the reshuffle. In my own opinion, I think we need to also be fair to say that there have been many reasons responsible for a lot of these issues. And so to say you want to attribute, for example, the downgrade at a narrow level, yes, you would say that it had an impact. But broadly, the South African economy is in a position, has been in a position of slow growth for quite a number of years, especially since 2008. And the foreign exchange the appreciation and depreciation of the foreign exchange is actually caused by a number of variables. So you can look at each individual moment, whether it's the oil price shocks or whatever other reason. There are various reasons for these things to happen, and I think we need to not seek scapegoats, but to bear in mind that these issues can be caused by a number of reasons. And to be fair, the first downgrade happened before the reshuffle itself happened. So even as we arrived on Friday, the decision to review our investment grade had already been taken. And so let's not seek scapegoats. I think right now the focus for us should be, as I was saying earlier, to restore the investment grade, to avoid any further downgrade, to get the economy growing, and to focus on that inclusive growth, because I think that should be the priority for the country. Is there mixed messages from the finance ministry? No. There is only one finance minister in South Africa. He doesn't speak in forked tongues. He has been consistent with regard to the policies of government and government's perspective on a variety of issues. The opinions of the advisor of the minister outside the minister are not the opinions of the minister. The minister is not schizophrenic. He has one voice, and I have been very consistent. There is only one message coming from the finance ministry. The deputy minister and I have been consistent with regard to what is the view. The opinions of the advisor to the minister were his, and those opinions have been, as I said, reined in. Whatever other thing may be reported about whether the advisor can be reined in, like any other advisor in government, they express their opinions to the principal, and the principal makes the choice whether they take that advice or not. And it's important to also repeat this, that, we shouldn't panic when there is a plurality of views. It shouldn't really cause us to panic and feel that there's something wrong going on. We should worry if there is only one view that's being expressed. Because what it would mean is that not all facts have been considered when decisions are being made. Advisors don't impose their views on their principals. Their job is to research issues, to present views, and those views are not imposed on the department, because the Treasury, actually almost everybody in the Treasury is an economist. And they are very, very good economists. I have listened to them both prior to my appointment as the Minister of Finance, and especially while I was now here. There is not a single person who can get to dominate opinions. And when we sit and discuss the different opinions, we then take well-considered and well-canvassed views. I'm not worried about any single individual who can dominate. And I think that even my advisors find that the space is open for good discussions, but there are policies that underpin what we have to do with the NDP at the heart. And so whatever decisions we take are informed by the National Development Plan and seek to advance the economy as the NDP guides us. And so there is no other view, absolutely none. No view to take up arms, no view to nationalize the banks, no view to nationalize the Reserve Bank or to nationalize the mines. In terms of government, no such views exist. I don't think anybody should worry about that. Let me go to what I said on the 1st, I think it was the 1st of April. And if you allow me, Chair, I will quote it a bit. I said, for too long, there has been a narrative or perception around Treasury. I didn't say it's mine. I said for too long there has been a narrative or perception around Treasury that it belongs primarily and exclusively to orthodox economists, big business, powerful interests, and international investors. With respect, this is a people's government. Treasury, like all the institutions of our democratic state, belongs to the people of South Africa, black and white, rich and poor, young and old, male and female, urban and rural. Its policies, its management, its communication must be accessible to all South Africans. Like the nation as a whole and government itself, the National Treasury does not exist for the exclusive use and benefit of some with power and vested interests, close quote. I think that puts the issue to rest. The balance will have to be struck, and it's going to be very tight, between pursuing inclusive growth and maintaining the fiscal line. And I think, as I've tried to say, that's why it's important to continue growing the economy. We will do everything we can to support growth in the economy so that we expand our revenue base, improve our efficiencies, including supporting the voluntary disclosures program to be able to collect more taxes and support the fiscus and the economy. But as we do that, it is our great interest that it's our view that supporting inclusive growth is not only the responsibility of the fiscus, important a role as it has to play, but it's not its only role. The private sector must chip in. Pursuing partnerships with the private sector is important in that regard. And a variety of programs, such as I have mentioned, will be important to do that. And so I think that we have to stay that course. The nuclear program is the decision of government insofar as IRP 2010 is concerned. And until there is a review, I shouldn't stand here and proclaim on my own that it is either that we either need more or we need less. I must respect also the ministers who are mandated in terms of cabinet responsibility with leading that process. And my job is to ensure that whatever decision is taken, whatever the volume of nuclear generation capacity we require, is implemented at a scale and pace that both the economy and the fiscus will afford. And I think that balance is important. The scale and pace that both the economy and the fiscus, so that it's not just a matter of the fiscus alone, because we could decide that we need so much capacity from nuclear, when in actual fact the level of growth in the economy is such that we cannot at that moment, or we don't need that capacity and cannot carry the investment required. And so we need to ensure that both the economy, the level of growth in the economy and the fiscus are both able to carry the investment that is required in that regard. Honorable Shibambu, very interesting. With regard to your 7-point plan and how and what excited you in the last few weeks. Hold on to it. I think we do need to support the industrialization programs. We do need to engage not only the existing programs, but to the extent that we can, to continue engaging with our colleagues, especially those responsible for infrastructure-related SOCs, to ensure that the infrastructure rollout supports the industrialization program, to support the supplier development programs, and ensure that we build a manufacturing sector in the country. And I agree with the view that we must continue supporting the financial sector transformation. We will engage with that program as it continues to unfold. The Border Management Authority, in that regard, let me say first, I'm guided by cabinet decisions. There shouldn't be an expectation that the Minister of Finance can be both a part of cabinet and stand outside cabinet at the same time. There shouldn't be such an expectation. But the Minister of Home Affairs and I are going to continue discussing this issue in order to find a solution, because I think it is possible. I therefore maintain the view that I maintained over a month ago, that the two departments, as well as the two entities, the two agencies, SARS and the BMA, when it is established, should be able to find one another on what is the best way to implement the BMA without creating unnecessary fragmentation in terms of revenue collection. And I think that if the bill as it stands does not address that sufficiently, and I'm happy that you talk about the fragmentation of revenue collection. If the bill as it stands does not address that sufficiently, then I think when it moves on, we should be able, that the final outcome does address that item, that issue. You know, as a person, you will know this because you just got married. You get not only do people outside suggest to you that, no, do this, dress like this. You know, you may want to conduct yourself in a particular way. My wife also does the same. She doesn't seek to influence my work. She knows that my work is my work. When she says that I would bring issues relating to passports to him, you know, people send her messages. Mrs. Gigaba, can you please refer this issue to the minister. I had applied for a passport, this, that, and the other happened, or ID or birth certificate. And she takes those things and she brings them to me. She doesn't say to me, solve this in this way. She says to me, I have this thing which has been brought to me. Hewa, you take it and deal with it the way you have to. Doesn't impose any opinion or decision on me. And certainly that's not what she said. Because what she was saying is, people bring issues to her, she brings them to me. She is also a citizen, she goes to Home Affairs, she comes back, she says, look, you may want to consider doing this or doing that. Whether we do it or not is really our decision. And even me, I base those decisions on the advice I get given by the department. As you continue with your married life, you will realize that in actual fact, there's absolutely nothing untoward. There is no desire to influence how the EFF or how you should play your role as the deputy president of the EFF, or even how you should play your role as a member of this committee.
Especially because the wife comes from the...
Yes. And I hope she actually influences you in that regard. You may want to listen to her. And really, there is, we shouldn't make meat out of nothing. Because at the end of the day, there is no tender that even was got by the company she works for as a result of, whilst I was Minister of Home Affairs. So there's absolutely nothing. I think we're just making a fuss out of nothing, and everybody who is married knows that, opinions come, people bring things. In actual fact, what she says is that I will become very sensitive, especially given his new role, because she understands the responsibility that I carry as the Minister of Finance. And so I think we're making meat out of nothing, and I think we shouldn't play politics by bringing our spouses and even our children and families into politics. When we fight as politicians, we should do it ourselves, because we've got the skin and the temperament for it. I think bringing wives and spouses and families is the low side of politics. It's actually wrong. It shouldn't be done. I wouldn't do it to you too, on Twitter or on any other social network. I think I've dealt with the issue of how do we accelerate inclusive growth in a tough environment, and I've said it's not the responsibility of the Fiscal alone. The supply chain reforms must be pursued, because there is a package of things we need to do to address the plight of the black majority for a role in the economy. And supply chain reforms, including how we use the government procurement expenditure, how we strengthen the role of the chief procurement officer, so that it's not only focused on fighting corruption, it also and ensuring transparency and compliance with supply chain procedures, but we also use it in a way to support the transformation we require for black people to create assets and own parts of the economy, to support SMMEs and ensure that through our procurement processes, we support that drive for transformation in the South African economy. It's quite important. And we will engage with that process. I know that the Treasury had done a lot in that regard, and so we will support that effort. And I agree, Chairperson, that we need to employ the Chief Procurement Officer, but not only the Chief Procurement Officer, but a new DG as quickly as possible. I'm not saying we don't need you any longer. We still do. Now, we must intensify sectoral outreach, and I think the statement I referred to, I quoted, which says that let's continue making every South African feel that treasury belongs to all of them, and not a few. It's for all of us. Every South African must feel that they have a role, they have a stake, and can be reached. One of the difficult things, the Deputy Minister went on Ukhozi and for an hour was explaining these difficult finance concepts in Zulu. I did that at WEFA also, and other local radio stations. I think it's an attempt to reach out to as many of our people as possible and try to simplify these concepts for them. We look forward, Chairperson, to receiving the issues, the decisions that the committee had made vis-à-vis the executive over the last 6 months. We will come back to explain how we are dealing with the SAA challenge, because I do believe that SAA can and will be turned around. And we need to be very firm with how we move in that regard. I look forward to the challenge of turning SAA around in regards to their financial position, their route networks, their maintenance, the fleet that they are managing, the leadership of SAA, which has remained unstable for quite a long period of time.